So, welcome everyone to the Adult Child in Recovery podcast. My name is Vandana, and I am the creator of Vandana Light Healing. My website is vandanalighealing.com. And I thank you so much for really taking time out of your busy day. This podcast really is dedicated to all adult children who experienced ongoing, repetitive, complex PTSD, symptoms of PTSD, but also all types of dysfunctional family environments in their everyday life that seemed like it was normal. But as we grow up, we realize that these types of this type of sort of chaotic and dysfunctional family upbringing is not normal. And what it does is these symptoms really affect our everyday realities as adults, our relationships, our work life, our home life, our friendships, and really create a lot of pain and a lot of disconnection from our true self. So every week I interview and have really hopefully meaningful conversations, enlightening conversations to support you so that you don't feel alone and you don't feel like it's just you or that there's something wrong with you, because it's just generational, it's ancestral, and all of these unhealed, untreated wounds are simply passed on to you, but you had nothing to do with that. But we're here now. So I just want to introduce you to my guest today and welcome Fred Moss.
Thank you. It's really great to be here. Thanks for that introduction and for the understanding of what the impact is that you're making with your listeners on an everyday basis. And I applaud that totally. I really appreciate the whole definition of what you're speaking to, and this whole idea of how our responses to trauma in the past really tend to separate us out and leave us feeling like we're alone or that we're stuck, or even more than anything else, that there's something wrong with us. And these are the kind of things that I've been addressing for 36 years as a psychiatrist, and another 9 years before that as a child care worker. So about 45 years in the mental health field, where I've had an opportunity to work with hundreds, if not thousands of people who believe that, really wholeheartedly, that it is their past experiences that are dictating who they get to be right now in such a way that leaves them sensing a level of dysfunction or a level of incapacity, a level of freezing or at least difficulty in dealing with the world as it's coming at us or coming at them. And so the opportunity exists inside of conversations and connecting with another person to really rewrite and then refocus and then contextualize or reconceptualize what it really means to be human and what it really means to be human with a dramatic or traumatic past.
Exactly. Well said. And, everything because of this repetitive trauma and the shock, the shocking, unsettling life events, the abuse, the neglect, the abandonment, just all that dysfunction really is stored in our body. It's stored in our cells, it's stored in our muscles and our organs, all of these unsettling memories. And it really makes it hard to function and really hard to really know how to be ourselves, how to live authentically, right? So I like that you call yourself the undoctor. So let me just read your bio if it's okay, and maybe it'll make more sense after I read your bio why you call yourself the undoctor, but I'm intrigued already. So Fred was a college dropout who found a job as at a state mental health facility for adolescent boys, but he didn't like how those kids were treated and decided to do something about it. So Fred went back to college and got his master's degree in psychiatry, and the rest is history.
Medical degree, not master's.
Say that again?
It's a medical degree, not a master's degree. I'm an MD.
Okay, I'm just reading straight from your bio. That's what it says. That's what I
Yeah.
was sent. So, okay, thank you. Yeah, medical degree. So Dr. Fred offers a groundbreaking perspective on psychiatry, focusing on holistic approaches, effective communication, and authenticity. His advocacy for understanding humanity over diagnosis and medication challenges traditional psychiatric practices. Dr. Fred emphasizes the power of genuine connections, self-expression, and also being heard in the healing process. Very important for adult children because our needs were never met, and also our voices were never heard. So that makes it difficult to maintain healthy relationships. He critiques the over-prescription of medications and the profit-driven nature of the mental health industry, advocating for more compassionate and inclusive approaches globally. His personal journey underscores the importance of embracing authenticity, overcoming challenges, and finding purpose. He also promotes creativity as a vital tool for healing and offers coaching services, including podcasting, to facilitate personal growth and connection. So overall, Dr. Fred advocates for a transformative psychiatry that prioritizes empathy, communication, and holistic well-being. So on that note, let's talk. Let's dive right in. I know that you like to talk about unmasking mental health beyond diagnoses, right? Beyond like the standard books that they go by. I forgot the name of it, but there is that
The DSM.
Thank you, DSM.
Yeah.
And I know a lot about this also firsthand because my son is on the autistic spectrum, and we were told that first he had ADHD when he was 7 or 8, and then when he was 13, it was like, no, it's Asperger's, and now it's called autism. So obviously, apparently, Asperger's is not really a thing anymore, or it's sort of grouped together under one umbrella. And it can be very confusing and unsettling for parents like me. And now he's 33, so I don't use any kind of labels or diagnoses. I'm only just bringing this up that he's neurodiverse, he's a little different, little quirky, but also that this is a super ability, not a disability. So that's how I was able to heal the stigma of this diagnosis many years ago. So can you talk a little bit about, maybe your own experience or your childhood, and, what brought you? I know that you had this job when you were working with adolescent boys. You didn't like the way they were treated, and you felt a need to help them and support them differently. But what led you to that before? And then we'll come back to the unmasking question.
Yeah, so I was born to my own little family in chaos and disarray. I had 2 older brothers, 10 and 14 years older than me, that were waiting for me, and really waiting for me to bring joy and love to this family that was in a fair amount of trouble. And apparently I did a pretty good job at that early on. I was a bundle of joy, and all 4 of them worked hard to take care of me. Before I had my little sister, who became a partner in some ways in crime, that was born about 2.5 years later. So in that process, I learned, I think I learned pretty, in the fire, pretty much how to heal, how to listen, how to heal, how to be with people. And I really began to become extremely enamored with the whole idea, really entertained with the whole idea of what communication was. And I watched my parents and my brothers talk to each other and wish that someday that I could learn how to communicate effectively. And, I thought that was going to happen in the school setting, in the conventional school setting, but that isn't where I was taught. In school, really, what I had to say, or my self-expression, was really reduced, was really smothered, as all of us are. We're told more or less to sit down and just regurgitate whatever the teacher says. And if we do that really well, we get to say we're a good student, and then we pass on to the next grade. At home, there was a fair amount of, just everyday trouble, but it isn't like I have a history of massive trauma or massive sources for any kind of chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. Life serves us up all sorts of trials and tribulations and hurdles and obstacles for sure. And I had those challenges as I was growing up. I was really a precocious child. They taught me a lot of things early on. So I came into school, knowing a lot about, I knew how to read, I knew how to write, I knew how to do math, even in kindergarten. And so I was ahead of the class. And I was very self-expressed. So there's no elementary school teacher who ever forgot having Fred as a student. Pretty sure about that. And that moved on over time, and I really became, friends. I became somebody who loved listening to stories. I became somebody who my friends could count on to tell me whatever was going on with them. So I almost became like a therapist early on in elementary school, or certainly as the years went on. And that's how I found myself really interested in people who were troubled, extremely interested in people who were living on the other side of the tracks, or people who had experiences that I didn't know about. I was always exploring, very adventurous, taking my bike to the other side of town, or hitchhiking, or exploring. The kids who were having trouble in school became my best friends. These are the people I just have always gravitated to. And so, I went to college hoping to learn how to communicate. And that didn't happen in Ann Arbor either, not in the college. It did happen in Ann Arbor, but not in the University of Michigan. And then I actually went back a second time because I was directed there. Someone said that there was this new industry that looked very promising. They thought I would be good at, and that new industry was computers at the time. So I was like, well, I can go back and see how that is. And that didn't work out. So I did drop out a second time. And then, I told my mom I wasn't going to go back to school for any reason ever again. No way. And she's like, okay, that's fine, but you have to get a job. That's what moms do. They make you get a job and stuff. So I got a application for, a state mental health facility for a civil service job for working with the kids. And I thought I was only going to stay for the orientation, actually. I thought there were 3-week orientation. They're going to pay me 3 weeks of full-time pay. And I was going to get some money and then go buy my Volkswagen and drive around town and, figure out what my life was about. But I was convinced to stay on that 4th week. That was an important day for me when Paul convinced me to stay and go up to the floors. And, I've pretty much been a glorified childcare worker for 45 years since January of 1980 as a result of that. And I learned a lot in that setting about communication and connection, as that's what was called on in that job. It really just connect with these kids who were like 6 or 7 years younger than me, treat them like humans all the time, not like a diagnosis, not like they're different, not like they're affected or afflicted or defective ever. And that's really what has dictated my entire psychiatric career. Is I don't see someone I don't see someone with Asperger's. I don't see somebody with chronic PTSD. I don't see somebody with borderline personality. I don't see somebody with diagnosis ever. I never see that. Right. I just wash that away and get that somebody else called them that, and they either agreed or disagreed. And so what?
Right.
What we're looking here as a human.
Right. It's fascinating. And as you say on your website that you heal mental illness, quote unquote, whatever that is, whatever that label is all about, authentically and honestly. And creatively, which you say is a secret sauce for personal growth. So let's circle back a little bit, if it's okay, to unmasking mental health beyond diagnosis. Can you just expand on that just a little bit for whoever's listening?
Diagnoses are entirely arbitrary, 100%. And so, we make them up after the fact. Oftentimes, having been in the field now for 4+ decades, the diagnosis get made up after the treatments get discovered. And so we get a set of symptoms that are actually going to fit the treatment or the medications that have been discovered. And frequently those medications actually induce, increase, perpetuate, or cause the symptoms they are marketed to treat. So almost like an appetizer, they sort of soothe you for a moment and then make things entirely worse, either in the same direction or in a different psychiatric direction, for which you then have to take more medicines or more treatment or more. It is the essence of a self-perpetuating industry. There's never been an industry that has been this self-perpetuating as the present mental health industry is the United States and in Western culture.
Yeah.
What is unmasking? Unmasking we don't even have a clue what normal is, and yet we have the audacity to declare people abnormal. There's never been an adequate definition of what normal mental health really is entailed, other than what the viewer or the diagnoser thinks is normal. So, you come in, you get seen by somebody who has a range of what they have seen or what they believe or what they've been taught falls into the range of normal. And if you fall outside of that, you get called abnormal and get a diagnosis. Now, here's the other thing. You always get a diagnosis. Whenever you go into a mental health professional, you always get a diagnosis. They will not get paid if they don't give you a diagnosis. So you are, in fact, they need to give you a diagnosis, and you will walk away with a diagnosis. Now, once
so
you
that you come back and then you have to be on Medicaid, so that you'll have to come back and be on meds.
Well, depending on the diagnosis, you'll have to either be on meds or you'll have to get some form of treatment for sure. It's like the idea of, and you can see I've done this a few times. If you go to a barbershop enough times, you're going to get a haircut. If you go to a mental health professional enough times, which is usually only once, you're going to get a psychiatric diagnosis. And that may or may not fit your sense of yourself. But once it does fit your sense of yourself, once you've been given a diagnosis, you're like, okay, I like that diagnosis. That explains the areas of my life that aren't working very well. Like, I get it. And then we actually agree to the diagnosis, and then we become that diagnosis the way that we think it's designed. And we become a group of people who are grouped amongst other people with that same diagnosis. It's funny, diagnoses are so nebulous, and in the end, they're really vague and rather arbitrary. In other words, if you have a diagnosis in the United States, for instance, at a particular hospital or clinic or doctor's office, and you take that diagnosis to another country, and I've done it my fair share of being a psychiatrist in multiple different countries, it might not even be seen as a diagnosis anymore. It might be seen as you're normal, or you're even better than normal, or you're gifted, or you're a shaman, or you've got special skills. And
so it's cultural too. It's culturally influenced as well.
And that just plays into the arbitrary nature of the definition. So if in fact the definition changes when you go to a different place on the planet, it's not a really firm definition anymore. So that's just the way it is. And because the definition does indeed change from culture to culture, it's not a firm definition, and unmasking the myth, if you will, that there even is a mental illness. So your listeners are really important here. And so let me just say something. If there's anyone in your listenership who is really happy with their diagnosis, super loves their treatment plan, really loves their medication, and wouldn't change this thing for a world because you finally got to your definition that you needed about how you got to be who you got to be and what the problems are and all that, and you love what the things are going, then this conversation really isn't for you. You by all means, you should keep doing exactly, no kidding, exactly what you're doing. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not arguing with that. And if anywhere in life you get that level of confidence, you should keep doing that for sure. This is for the tens of millions of people for which that is not the case. There are many people who feel misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, overdiagnosed, mistreated, overmedicated, undermedicated, mismedicated. And those people know that what I'm saying is really true, which is that the medications and the treatment plans are often built to perpetuate the symptoms they're marketed to treat and create an ongoing lifetime client or patient. And it's nothing wrong with that. It's a great business model, actually. I kind of wish I would have designed it, but I didn't design it. And so I'm out here actually toiling through it and just bringing the truth of my clients and the public. And it's usually understood by people who have, been through the program a little bit, who really understand the way that psychiatry really works, that in fact, this is how it really works. And there are much better ways to handle the dysfunction and imbalance of how to manage life.
Absolutely. I mean, a combination of, integrative care, combination of therapy, whether it's, CBT or DBT or whatever, and, psychiatric meetings or, office visits or whatever, like prescription drugs, not just one or the other, but they say that a combination of both is really the ideal way to go. Because I don't think it, would serve people to just, kind of like have a psychiatrist write off a medication prescription and just ask one or two questions and then say goodbye. I think it's important to have a combination of someone who's really there for that person, who's really present, who's emotionally available and is attuned, to whoever it is that is experiencing these, the stress or this anxiety every day. So I think a combination of both. Would you agree?
Well, I would agree, but it also can happen from the same person. So wouldn't imagine a doctor who is
It can.
mostly available, who is actually cared and who is actually present with the client, an
Yeah.
actual doctor who then not only didn't, it's not like do medication plus CBT, that's the best. The industry, of course, is going to tell you to do both. I mean, McDonald's tells you to order fries with their burgers too. Please do both of them.
Okay.
Like, please do
All
both of
right.
them. It helps our industry a lot. And so,
Mhm.
of course, they're going to say that that is the best. And they're the ones who do the study on themselves to come up with that. So imagine a doctor who's actually listening, who's actually present, who's actually available, who's actually emotionally attuned, and
Yeah.
really able to determine whether or not medicines may or may not even be the route to take at all. And more likely than not are going to make things worse. If you can imagine that somebody who knows that medicine's more likely than not makes things worse, no kidding,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
the possibility of just having a doctor who understands that and chooses treatment plans that are only out there to actually move you forward in a life and optimize the things that matter to you, then you get a whole different approach. It isn't about the classical conventional understanding that you should have a therapist and a prescriber.
And the only reason that it seems that would be in a more ideal scenario is because I haven't ever come across, I mean, regarding my son, I've never been to a psychiatrist, but I've taken my son when he was younger to different, on different consultations and things like that. And none of them really took the time, like you're explaining. Like I couldn't find that in one person. So I guess that's why you call yourself the undoctor, because you're different and maybe treat patients from a more holistic approach than lots of others.
Well, it may be. I don't know. I don't see myself. I just see myself as being me. I'm just a glorified childcare worker. That same dude who worked at Fairlawn Center in 1980. I'm
Right.
just still that guy. And I think what the undoctor has a different connotation, a different suggestion, which is the
Yeah.
undoctor is somebody who undiagnoses, unmedicates, and then undoctrinates people, taking people out of the mental health
Uh,
industrial industry altogether. And really realizing that when my job is done right, I work myself out of a job entirely. Like I'm no longer necessary
right.
for anybody. That's completely okay with me to work myself out of a job, to get somebody so that they're self-sufficient, knowing that life is extraordinarily challenging and that the good come with the bad, the difficulties and the hurdles and the obstacles that are here in life are real. Yours are different than the person next to you, and you have a challenge to deal with them. And they do not have to dictate in any way you acting today dysfunctionally at all. Even if you've had loads and loads of difficult times in the past, it does not have to dictate your future. And we start learning the real tools that help us now in recoloring our future so that we can take pathways that otherwise are not consistent with the habits that's brought us to now.
Right. So how does somebody know when it's time to be undoctored?
Anytime, of course. You should. The mental health field is not the primary way to come after your psychiatric symptoms for the most part. And what undoctoring is,
Mhm.
look, when I'm interviewing someone for whether or not they're ready for my services, what I'm interested in more than anything is, can you hear the possibility that there's nothing wrong with you?
Right.
Can
Yeah,
you even
exactly.
deal with that possibility? Because if the answer is no, there is something wrong with me and that's the way it is, then they're not ready to be undoctored. Being undoctored includes the
Gotcha.
possibility that you're actually just a human going through life like we all are, whether you've had loads and loads of unspeakable trauma or not.
Hmm.
The object here is to get that you have to be able to be willing to hear one day down the road that there might literally be nothing wrong with you. Now that's the important space. Now, again, it's interesting. Psychiatry is the only subspecialty in all of medicine, and maybe anywhere, to be honest, that people come to my office, and if I tell them that there's nothing wrong with them, they get pissed. It's like, wait,
Right.
well, there's nothing wrong with you. And they're like, no, there's something wrong with me. And I'm going to go next door and have a doctor to tell me what is wrong with me.
Or get a second opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. And really disregard the notion that they might be literally okay struggling with all the struggles of what life has to offer. You know, Krishnamurti said it is no sign of mental health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. That is very, very, very true. This is a profoundly difficult, challenging, obstacle-based society that we're living in. And if you're having trouble actually managing life, welcome to humanity.
Right. And we live in a toxic culture. There's an amazing book by Gabor Mate, my favorite book, called The Myth of Normal. Unlike you mentioned before, what is normal anyway? I mean, and what's abnormal? And who's to say what is normal and abnormal, right?
Yeah.
So, so this is amazing. It's refreshing, actually, to hear you speak about your ideology and how you don't judge or put people in boxes and assume the worst about people, and that it feels not only more authentic, but more life affirming. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate that a lot. My son is, has been on medication for the first time in his life for the last, what's that, like 6 months? And what I have noticed, what's different, it's mostly, for anxiety, but it hasn't really achieved the goal of why we first started working with this psychiatrist, which was to get him outside, to get outside the house, to interact with other people, to get on a train. This all pretty much got a lot worse after COVID, after the pandemic began. So that hasn't really helped with that at all. But what it has helped with, what I do see a shift and a difference, is his temperament seems just a lot calmer. But he's still like really spacey and not really present. So whether you want to label that as ADHD, which he was labeled when he was very young, or that's just, how he is, that's who he is. So I do see, like, in some ways it kind of numbs, or it just, like, I don't know, puts a blanket over like any heat, like any like inflammation or frustration, irritation, because he had a lot of anger and rage with good reason, growing up, and teased and picked on and bullied a lot in school and so forth. So in one way, I see that it helps a little bit because he doesn't explode like he used to. But he'll still give like little sarcastic jabs here and there. And he still has the same temperament. He's still the same person, but it's just like a little subdued. So I have mixed feelings about it. And I think he's very comfortable with it, because he but unfortunately, like, it's become a crutch, which I think medication does become, because then that could be another kind of addiction, maybe not food, drugs, or alcohol, or shopping, but, maybe medication can also become an unhealthy, dependency. So that's just my experience. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah. Yeah, things shifted a lot in 1987 with the advent of Prozac. Before that time, so I picked up my job in 1980, and we were still using some medications in the form of generally injectables, and the kids were taking sometimes one medicine, but the injectables are still being used in every hospital every single day around the country, everywhere in this work. And so, basically, if someone was up too late, or they argued with staff, or they got into a verbal match with each other, then we'd call the doctor and he'd write an order, and we'd have to go retrieve the kid and hold him down to the ground, and then, pack him full of some cocktail injectable, that's not old school. That's every day now too, everywhere. Like, that's happened. That's what happens in hospitals. That's just one of the things that happens in hospitals. And that's one of the things when I said that I didn't like the way things were going in the hospital, that was one of the things I just couldn't stand that we were doing to these kids, because I actually really adored these kids, and I really adore all my clients actually. And, the idea is that once we start medicating, we create a certain a new level of whether it's numbness or smothering or whatever you say that we're doing, blunting with your son or with anyone else. We create a new mindset that actually is indeed a new level of a chemical imbalance caused by the medicine.
Right. Yeah, I could see that.
Medicine. The whole point of the medicine is to cause a chemical imbalance. That's what we do. And indeed, it does naturally do that. So it may or may not have had a chemical imbalance on the way in. And most cases, there is not a chemical imbalance on the way in. And we want to counteract that by giving some sort of anti-chemical imbalance, chemical imbalance. And so,
right.
And that's what these medicines do. So then you measure whether or not he has anger outbursts, and you call that progress, because in the same way at the mental hospital in Fairlawn in Pontiac, when I was there working there, if the kid was in a stupor for the next 24 hours, we'd call that a success. And it was like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, because it's not really addressing the root cause of the problematic behavior. It's not healing at all.
Not at all.
It's just putting a Band-Aid on it, temporary fix.
I wish it was a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid.
What would you call it?
It's a Band-Aid with a razor blade embedded in it.
Oh, okay. That's a lot worse. That sounds a lot worse.
Doing, because it actually makes things worse on the outside. And so I wish it was simply a Band-Aid. If it was actually doing what it was intended to, I could actually vote for it. But it doesn't do what it's intending to do. It does worse. It actually causes the symptoms it was marketed to deal with to increase. Now, we think that it's a condition, just like a Band-Aid with a razor blade on it. If you put a Band-Aid with a razor blade on a cut, then it'll get better for a while, right? The cut will be covered. It'll get better. It won't bleed anymore. Your clothes won't get stained. Everything's going to be okay. And then blood starts oozing out of the sides after a while, and you think your cut got worse. And the last place that you would look for whether or not your cut got worse, like what the causes of your cut getting worse, would be into the actual Band-Aid. We would think, oh no, the cut got worse. Thank God I got it on Band-Aid on it, because the cut got worse. I just have to now go get a bigger Band-Aid. So you go get a bigger Band-Aid, and it has a razor blade embedded in it as well. So again, it gets better for a short period of time, but then the cut gets worse. And the cut gets worse because there's a razor blade in the treatment. And when you get that there's an actual unseen razor blade in the treatment, you start seeing why we create perpetual patients inside of the conventional psychiatric system. That patient is not going anywhere. The patient who is addicted to Band-Aids with razor blades in it, my patient forever, for sure, as long as I continue to give them Band-Aids.
Yeah, and then when, the injury starts oozing and coming out from the sides of the Band-Aid, then I'm not saying all, but I think the majority of psychiatric providers would double and triple the dose. Well, then you need more. We need to give you more and more and more. And that just counteracts the benefits. And that's, I've actually seen that, not to that dramatic degree, that analogy that you just pointed out. But I've seen that over time, the goal is to just give them a lot of high dosing medication.
We like to sort of point the finger on the provider increasing the dose, but more often than not, the patient comes in and says, I need an increased dose. So it's not,
Well, it wasn't true in this case. That didn't apply. I mean, I think my son, he just talks to her on Zoom, and she'll just ask how he's feeling. And then, but her goal from the beginning was to gradually increase the dose more and more. So I don't even think that, because nothing crazy happened or dramatic.
Doesn't have to be crazy or dramatic at all.
Yeah, that was just her goal, but it scares me and it makes me feel uncomfortable.
That's the direction that they're going to have to go in, because even doctors are unaware that there's an actual virtual razor blade in their Band-Aid.
Yeah, that's totally scary. So I want to respect your time. I know you only have about like 7 minutes left, I believe. Can you do you have time to talk a little bit about AI and mental health and how they seem to be related, or how you're working with AI?
I am working with AI, and I think the idea is that, a lot of times that we're starting to mechanize our treatment plan. That's how most people are using AI in mental health, is actually creating bots to be able to answer the questions using old time evidence-based answers that actually perpetuate the same symptoms that we're talking about. So the system gets in fact embedded into how mental health gets created, the recognition and support and confirmation for diagnosis-based treatment plans that, if you have this diagnosis, you should head towards CBT or DBT or EMDR or whatever you're working for, and then becomes automated in that way. So we start losing the frequency of the human connection using AI as treatment goals, as treatment providers. I have found, and I think most people would agree, that in that connection, I need my fourth chakra. I need to have my heart chakra actually present. If all I'm using is the sixth chakra, which is what AI is all about, then, if all I'm using is a little bit of fifth and a lot of sixth chakra, then I can create a connection that looks like it's real, but it's without that heartfelt frequency, harmonic frequency that allows me to connect with the actual client who's looking for help. Because inside of the magic of a human connection at that very moment, and I learned this in the prisons and the jails, the inpatient units where there's supposedly really supposedly super sick people or something, is that if I get right through that and get to that person and connect with them wholeheartedly at the moment, healing takes place instantaneously. Right, that very whole new person arises. And this is true for both of us. Healing is a mutually satisfying experience.
And so that's what's missing in a lot of professions,
Fourth chakra is
the heart connection, the heart-centered connection, the deep listening.
Deep listening requires chakra too, exactly.
And the compassion and the loving kindness and compassion. And that's missing even from a lot of, religions, even Buddhism. I've been a Buddhist for many, many years, a Buddhist practitioner, and I found it missing from the tradition that I was practicing. And that's why I'm not doing it anymore. So I'm just really focusing inward instead of outward. Yeah. So thank you so much. Fred, how can people find you? If they'd like to book a session, or I know you do a lot of different things. You're a podcaster, you're a multifaceted human being. So how can people find you and look you up?
So there's, I do a lot of things. I'm a podcaster, I'm a speaker, I'm a presenter, I'm a consultant, I'm an author, I'm a doctor, I'm a coach. I do all those things indeed. So I'm spread very wide in the landscape. But if you really want to find where I'm at, the one thing you could do is look at Dr. Fred, drfred360.com. That's a really good place to find me. I'm also toil around on LinkedIn and Facebook. There's other places to find me. And I'm really interested these days in putting people in my school group. So that's SKOOL. Alex Hormozi has put together a really amazing program for a community of like-minded individuals, and that can be clients and providers and caregivers and everyone. It's called Welcome to Humanity, which is my main brand. And you can find that at skool.com/welcome to humanity, no dashes, and then /about. So it's skool.com/welcome to humanity /about. And I invite your listeners to come. It's free for a while. It's not going to be free forever. You get a lifetime membership to join, and all people are welcome. And all we're asking is for people who deal with or are feeling like there's something wrong with them and that they're stuck and want a different approach in how to deal with life.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing that. And thank you for being of service. Everyone needs a strong support system. Yeah. No one should be alone in their grief and sorrow and loss and try to fix themselves by self-medicating either. Right. And if people want to find me, I'm at vanzanalighealing.com for an inner child coaching, mentoring sessions, and many other types of healing workshops that I teach every week on Zoom. And also if anyone out there is really feeling alone and trapped and just isolating, which is a very common symptom when you have had a lot of past trauma. I would suggest going on ACA.org. It's Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. They have an amazing, and it's free, 12-step program. And I mean, personally, I created a group on my own where I took a little break from it because it does bring up a lot, but just to have a support system, just to have your voice being heard, and also to hear other people venting and sharing their experiences, so you don't just feel like it's you. So that's like a really, really important experience. I would recommend it for everyone. So thank you again, Fred, and thank you for your time. And thank you for being an undoctor. And looking forward to seeing everyone next time in the next episode. So be well and take care.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.